This is going to be a caught on the mic first. The first time I have ever recorded a prologue and an epilogue to an episode. Now, this prologue is obviously playing before the intro music even starts, and there is a reason and purpose for that, namely being the sensitive nature of the information contained within. As you will learn from my typical intro, I am having a medium/psychic on the show today. Through the process of this episode, somebody came through for me, and it does tie to a recent loss that I have had in my life. The process of belief and the process of grief are things that are very unique to every individual, and they should be respected in that manner. It would be foolish of me to be forthright and try and prove or disprove somebody's psychic abilities. I do not know the extent of a person's psychic abilities. Maybe it's just coincidence. Maybe my guest is the real deal. These phenomena are fun to think about and explore, but be careful when you do have an experience and it comes to entertainment and money. After sharing a clip with my two younger brothers, there has since been some information that has come to light that I will address in the epilogue of this episode contained within. So I ask that you enjoy it, have a good time, listen to this episode, and if you want to talk to me about it afterwards, feel free to shoot me a message. Without further ado, this is Caught on the Mic. Disclaimer: the views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent. Listener discretion is advised. It is not a first-time occurrence to have a psychic on this podcast, but this episode contains some first-time occurrences. Meet Jacque Hilbrich, a gifted psychic medium and aura reader with over 7 years of professional experience. Since childhood, Jacque has possessed a natural ability to see energy and tap into her intuition. These gifts have allowed her to touch the lives of clients all over the world, and her incredible accuracy led to subsequent readings, helping her build a positive reputation in that community. Make sure you listen to this one from start to finish. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Caught on the Mic. So I've been talking about this since the last episode of the podcast. I had Savannah Woods from The Voice on, and we talked about energy. And before that, I had Mike from Charm City Paranormal on, and we also talked about energy. And we talked about how people kind of manifest energy or invite energies in as much as pushing energy out. So I think this episode is really timely. I'm super excited to have my next guest on, Jacque Hilbrich. How the heck are you?
I'm so excited to be here, Mike. Thank you for having me today.
Oh my gosh. Thank you for being here. I tell you, I'm not the biggest fan, and have no problem going on record of saying this. I'm not a huge fan of the Facebook podcast groups because 95% of them are like your multi-level marketing moms, boss babes, saying that they're life coaches,
Yep.
and everything in between. And we happened to meet on a Facebook podcasting group, and there was just something that I saw in your post. I'm like, okay, I'm going to throw my funny pitch out there and say, hey, just pay attention to my stuff. You're going to want to be on my show.
Yeah, it was hilarious. I loved your pitch. You were like, listen, my podcast speaks for itself. I'll let you make the decision. I was like, I got to be on.
So you're calling in from Chicago, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So you lived in Chicago your whole life?
No, I'm currently about an hour outside of Chicago, actually. So in a little town that nobody's ever heard of called Valpo. So I'm in Chicago all the time and do a lot of my work out in the city, but I've been in Valpo my entire life.
Well, Jacque, let's take this opportunity. Why don't you introduce yourself? Just tell your origin story and kind of talk about what it is that you do.
So I have been very intuitive and very spiritual since I was like 5 or 6 years old. That's the first time I can remember seeing actual energy with my physical eyes around people. And I remember distinctly like going to my mom and being like, why am I seeing colors around people? And she was like, don't tell anyone that you can do this. She was like, do not tell anyone. Obviously, because I'm a 5-year-old, she doesn't want me to be bullied and stuff. So that's when I knew that I had some sort of little gift with this. And over the years, I began just kind of playing with it. I got to around 12 years old, actually, and came down with a really terrible chronic illness that knocked me out for about 7 or 8 years. I was really sick, in and out of the hospital system. If I wasn't down with, a chronic migraine, I was, sick with the flu or had strep throat. My immune system was just non-existent. So I spent a lot of time isolated researching spiritual topics because it was always so fascinating to me. And during that time, I did a lot of research on, auras and chakras and crystals, just kind of trying to figure out like what it was I was experiencing. And when I finally recovered from my chronic illness and got to a place where my health was more stable, I really started to dive into this work because I realized I could help people with what I was seeing and what I was able to pick up on. So around the age of 19 or 20, I had what I like to call my second big spiritual awakening. I began doing practice readings, aura readings for my friends and my family members, and realized that I was really good at picking up intuitive information that people were not sharing with me. So after that, I began doing $15 aura drawings at a local crystal shop. And I was so accurate that I began getting booked out for like a couple months.
Wow.
It was crazy. Yeah. I was having people drive up all the way from Indianapolis to see me. I had a whole family come up and drive 3 hours just to get readings from me one day, which was amazing. And then after that, I began expanding into the online space because I realized I could kind of go from seeing auras with my physical eyes to seeing them in my mind's eye. So clairvoyantly, in the same space that you would imagine what an apple looks like, that's kind of where I'm getting those intuitive downloads. So after realizing I could go into the online space and reach even more people and help even more people with this gift, things kind of took off from there. And here we are today.
Clairvoyance, psychic abilities, mediumship, aura reader, that just kind of all connects together, right? It's like one big circle. It's not necessarily all meaning the same thing, because to be a psychic and be a medium can be two totally different things, right?
Right, absolutely. So being a psychic, I'm able to, see and predict future events for people, which has been really my main focus of my work, along with the aura readings, which is seeing the energy that surrounds people and, being able to see blocks in people, things like that. Mediumship, on the other hand, and being a medium, that is the, clearing haunted houses or doing what is called spirit rescue or connecting to past loved ones. So that's more of the mediumship stuff. So I kind of do, I'm a jack of all trades, or like a Jackie of all trades. I've got all three of those that I kind of do.
Jackie of all trades. I love that. I love that. I'm glad you brought up spirit rescue, because I'm a man that does his research. Yeah. And I know that's a practice that's kind of like your specialization to a degree. So why don't you define for my audience what spirit rescue is and kind of the process of spirit rescue?
Sure. So spirit rescue in like a pretty basic form is just crossing over stuck or stagnant spirits that may be for whatever reason, still on the earth plane. So that is your typical ghost story that you hear about, the lady that hasn't left her house in 50 years or whatever, for whatever reason. And there are many different reasons why a spirit may not cross over, varying from being scared of judgment on the other side. That's one that's very, very common for me to see. People that have passed kind of traumatically that don't even realize that they've died. That's another thing that I've picked up on a lot. So it really just depends on a case by case basis, but that's the basics of it.
And you've also participated in some cleansings as well.
I have worked professionally clearing houses, studios, restaurants, whatever you can think of, really. I've probably been there and cleared it since around 2016. And one of the biggest locations that I ever cleared was somewhere locally in Valpo. It's this old restaurant that is actually being completely bulldozed.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so that's a whole other thing. But that was the biggest cleansing that I've ever participated in, because there were multiple spirits in this location and multiple, times that I had to visit to actually get them out.
So what goes into the process of cleansing a place?
So most of the time it's pretty much you go in, it's actually a lot more boring than, what is portrayed in like the movies and things like that. But you go into the house or the location. I usually just try to have a conversation with the spirit or see if it is actually a spirit or if it's residual energy or if it's just something that they thought was a ghost that it isn't a ghost. I have to go in and be very skeptical when I'm first kind of scouting the location and doing the walkthrough. So usually what happens is if there is a ghost present or a spirit present, what I'll do is I'll just have a conversation and see sort of if they know that they've passed. If they do know that they've passed, why are they still there? And just kind of getting to the bottom of, what is actually going on to make it so that they haven't crossed over. Because even though there have been a lot of house cleansings I've done, it is very rare to have a spirit get stuck like that. So that's something also really important to kind of keep in mind, is that it's very rare. It is a rare occurrence.
You have an older sister.
Yes.
And she possibly has some of the same gifts as well.
Yes. So she was kind of the path maker for me, I feel like, because if she hadn't had experiences when she was younger, it wouldn't have ever led to my mom researching her own spirituality and my mom going through her spiritual awakening to basically lead the way for me and be able to say, oh, you're seeing auras when I was 5 years old. She never would have known that if it hadn't been for my older sister. So my older sister originally was able to see energy as well. She was able to do things like astral projection, and my mom was like, what in the world is happening? So she started kind of researching all these different things. And I really honestly believe that that is the reason why I've been able to open up so much with my gifts, is because of everything that was set up with my sister beforehand. So
that brings up a really good question. Have you ever researched your genealogy and kind of gone down the path to see if maybe grandparents or grandparents or anybody else in your family tree has experienced this?
So it's interesting. And I don't think I've ever shared this on a podcast before. With my dad's side, I definitely have. We've kind of looked, back. He's very intuitive as well. My whole family is. Mm-hmm. For my mom's side, she is actually adopted, so we don't have the information on that side. But I believe that there almost has to be somebody or something down the line that has contributed to us all being so intuitive.
You brought up astral projection.
Yes.
And one of the things, a practice I've gotten into in the past 5 years or so, when I go to bed, I kind of get myself in that mind and I actually start thinking of a different place, a different time. And it has led to some very lucid dreams to where I've woken up the next day and I'm like, did I experience something more than a dream whenever this has happened. And there have been some eerie things. I've not kept any notes or anything, but there have been some eerie coincidences in my life that has aligned with this.
Yeah.
So define astral projection. Let's get into that a little bit.
Sure. Astral projection it's actually something that everybody does when they're asleep. Energetically, when we go into a sleep state, our physical body is asleep, but we have something called an astral body, which is our energetic body. And it's connected to our physical body. But when we go to sleep, we almost have a bit of a tether from the astral body to the physical body. So when you're doing astral projection, what is happening is your astral body becomes awake while your physical body is asleep, and you're able sometimes to kind of explore either on Earth. You can go places, that we know about here. Some people like to travel, interdimensionally and go to other places, and lots of dream work is actually done on the astral plane. So it's very interesting concept. And I love that you've had experiences with that. One of the easiest ways to astral project too is to go from a lucid dream into astral projecting and being aware that you're dreaming, and then kind of redirecting the dream to, well, what does Egypt look like right now? Or what does, X, Y, or Z look like? What does this planet look like? And just kind of letting yourself go to those places. Really cool.
I would say in the movie universe, there's a lot of talk about multiverses and all of this, this other stuff. So it's kind of hard to blur the line between going to sleep with that fiction in your head and embracing the reality of what you may or may not be experiencing. But there have been some moments where I'm like, I feel like I am visiting an alternate reality of my life, and it is very, very real. And it has been that dream within the dream within the dream. My daughter calls it the dream loop sequence.
Yes.
And she's like, "Oh, you got caught in a dream loop, didn't you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I did. I did." Yeah. So
interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do you say whenever you consult with somebody that's had their own experiences or kind of tiptoeing around their own abilities of mediumship?
For mediumship, I think the biggest thing is you just have to build up that trust that even if something sounds crazy, giving the information may really resonate with the person, even if it doesn't make sense to you. One of my first mediumship readings I actually ever did, I was seeing this blue rose, and I was like, this doesn't make any sense. I was like, what? This lady's going to think I'm crazy if I tell her I'm seeing this blue rose. Like, what does this mean? I couldn't get any specific information about it. And finally, I was just like, can you tell me what this blue rose is? Like, what's going on? Like, why am I seeing this? And she was like, oh my gosh, I have a blue rose in one of my planters. Like it was some sort of like watering thing that people put in their planters. And she was like, when I was watering my plants this morning, I was talking to my dad and I was telling him, if I go see this medium, tell her about the blue rose so I know she's legit. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so we were both freaking out about it. It was really cool. So I think the biggest thing when you're starting your journey really is just trusting that the information that you're getting is coming through for a reason, and not to try to interpret it or, mess with it, and just to give it however you're getting it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now the hard question is how do you address people that are skeptical?
Oh, I love skeptics. Skeptics are my favorites. I actually, I've done a lot of readings for very skeptical people, and they will tell me up front, they're like, I had this one guy who came for a reading, and he goes, I come from a long line of real psychics, and so I'm going to know if you are full of shit, like, right away. And I was like, okay, all right, man. But I ended up doing a great reading for him, and he got multiple readings from me. So Skeptics make the world go round. Not everything is a sign from the universe. Not sometimes a tree is just a tree and a flower is just a flower. And sometimes you just see 222 on the clock and it's just because you looked at that time. So I think that skeptical people it's the balance. You have to have people that want to push things so you can prove it and make sure it's actually real. Because if we didn't have skeptics, we wouldn't really ever get to that place where we knew for sure that this stuff was real. Like, I have to bring through evidence that your loved one is actually here or that this thing is going to happen to you in 6 months. And if we don't have skeptics, then there's a lack of, balance.
Yeah. Have you ever questioned yourself in that context? Because, one of my favorite TV shows of all time is Psych. And because Sean Spencer, the main character of the show, was just super hypersensitive to context clues. Yeah. So he was able to pass that on as psychic ability. Have you ever questioned yourself in that regard? If maybe you're just super hypersensitive to context clues?
Oh, always. When I first started, I was like, am I just paying attention to people's body languages? Am I just wanting to see this for people? Am I just wanting to have this person come through for them? But as you're doing this work, there are things that come through that there's no way for me to have known some of these things. And again, it goes back to that self-trust of like, I just have to know that like, even if we can't see 6 months down the line right now, if I'm seeing, a pipe bursting, but the client is saying that that's impossible, I have to trust that there's something that's going to be happening down the road that's going to lead to that. So yeah, I questioned myself all the time. And then I started bringing some really crazy information through and I was like, I don't know how I knew that.
Right. So it's funny that you kind of mention all that and we kind of bring that thing forth because I think about it in terms of the galaxy paradox. Like, show me a picture of the entire universe. Show me a picture of our galaxy, then show me a picture of our entire universe. Well, there's no picture of our entire universe because it doesn't exist. So that means there are infinite possibilities throughout the world. So or throughout the universe, I should say. Yeah. So it is good idea to kind of chamber those expectations, chamber your hesitation for a little bit because we don't know all. We can't experience all. One thing I also lean to in the context of these types of conversations is going back to the whole science fiction thing. I think about the movie The Matrix, right? Oh, humans essentially are batteries. Like, totally. And energy is electricity to a certain extent. So like there has to be a way to communicate through energy and energy alone. Me moving my hand is a form of energy, but me not moving my hand is also a form of energy. Do I make sense?
Yeah, that makes total sense. If you look at chemistry, when you break things down to their very core, it's an atom, which is made of energy, so everything is energy. Everything has energy. And I tell people, even inanimate objects have very distinct, faint auras around them because they still have energy, just not as much as you or I do.
Right. Yeah. Right. So applying your abilities, one of the things I saw in your post, you were talking about, paranormal investigations and such. How many of those have you been on? And, where are some of your more high profile or some of your more favorite investigations you've done?
Oh, man. Okay. So I did a few house cleansings in San Diego, which was very intense because the area that I was in, the land was the problem. Because of what had happened on the land before. So I was dealing with spirits that I had never really come into contact with before, like that were a part of the land. They weren't really ghosts. They were more like, I nicknamed it like a land spirit. And I was like, oh my God, have I totally lost my mind? When I was doing this investigation, I haven't done any crazy investigations at like any famous haunted places or anything like that. It's mostly personal locations or studios, restaurants, stuff like that.
Do you want to?
I would love to. I would love to get some experience doing that. I think it would be amazing. I used to watch all these paranormal investigation shows and be like, can somebody help these spirits that are stuck here, instead of just like having people go in and be like, yep, there's definitely ghosts here. Like, we got them on the recording. I wish that they would bring people in to actually like help them move on,
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So I think we've reached that moment where we could talk about kind of what we were messaging about before we started this podcast. So you said that you may be getting a reading in regards to me. Are you there?
Yes. And you know how I know that is really happening is my internet is becoming unstable right before I start to go into that, which always happens.
Oh my goodness.
Literally every time I go to do a reading online, I do YouTube live streams sometimes where I'll pick up on spirits for people, and it will mess with the feed, or my mic will go out, or a light will go out. So very interesting how spirit likes to tamper with our
Oh my gosh.
electronics. But yes, I was definitely, we even got on the call. And I would love to just kind of tell you what I was getting. I was feeling extremely sick before I got on the call and could not figure out like what was going on. And as soon as I put together that it could be spirit making me feel that way, it was instantly gone. So,
oh wow.
Sometimes spirit will come through and will make you feel, or, something around the passing that they've experienced. And this person that I was picking up on for you wasn't even sure if you'd want to talk to him. That's what he said. So I'm wondering if you have a father figure that's passed that is like currently kind of trying to come through, because what he was saying was, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, were the first things that I heard him say. Besides the, I don't know if he's even going to want to talk. So I just want to, first of all, ask if it's okay for me to continue, and if you are open to me bringing information from him through, and kind of seeing if are okay with that.
Sure. Let me throw this into context for you.
Okay.
My father passed away on July 1st. I haven't talked to my father ahead of this probably for 15 years, except for maybe one or two conversations. I was estranged from my dad. I'm just gonna go ahead and open the whole thing up. I'm a byproduct of divorced parents. My mother gave up physical custody, complete custody of my younger brothers and I when I was 13 years old. My dad took on custody of my brothers and I at that age, but I was out on my own by the time I was 16. My younger brother, Steven, he was out on his own by the time he was 16. My youngest brother, Matthew, was out on his own by the time he was 16. We get into our adult lives, and despite all of this estrangement, we let our parents back in, made amends with our mother, made amends with our father, but ultimately made the decision that's probably in the best interest of my own mental health and the mental health of my children, that I do not have that relationship going forward. So adding more context to it,
Sure.
My dad, from the time I was a kid until the time he passed, he was a cry wolf person. So he was dying of something new every 3 to 6 months. So it happened so frequently. Whenever I finally took the call in November that he was really sick for real, I was like, yeah, right. I've heard this before. I've gone through this before. So how the whole situation went down is the very last day of June, I took a call and said, hey, we're putting dad in hospice care, so on and so on. And he was gone less than 12 hours later.
Wow.
So, and that was less than a month ago. So now you can go ahead.
Oh my gosh. Okay, well, now that makes sense, because when I feel spirit so strongly, they have such a need for whoever the person is that I'm giving the reading to say. And I think his big thing was I literally could not stop hearing him say, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, just for everything. And honestly, I think he thought you were just going to be like, nope, don't bring him up. Let's not talk about him, like sort of a thing because of your relationship, probably. So it's interesting. It's very interesting. He was making me feel, extremely ill towards the end, and also made me feel like maybe he wasn't fully there mentally when he passed. And also just an overwhelming feeling of like, I am so tired. I just don't think I can do this anymore, which may be why as soon as he was in hospice, he was like, I'm gone.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely it does. I don't know where he was at cognitively when he passed, but I know his health wasn't well. My dad was the type, I'm assuming that's who this is. Yeah. My dad was the type of person, I've never been a smoker, but he was a chronic smoker. He was lighting his next cigarette up with his last one, and it eventually caught up to him. Back when I was a kid, they found spots on his lungs when I was a kid, and that was like 20 plus years ago, and he never stopped. So he was very ill. My youngest brother, who took care of him the last few years he was alive, said that he had become a totally different person, particularly the last year. So in a good way. Like he's like, my youngest brother kept saying, he goes, I wish you could have seen him towards the end. I wish you could have seen him towards the end. I wish you could have experienced him towards the end. Yeah. So I mean, maybe very that kind of makes sense in context.
It definitely makes sense. And I feel like, if you don't mind me going into a couple other weird things that he was showing me, is one, I feel like he wants to bring up your kids, and that he acknowledges now, having been on the other side, how great of a dad you are. Like, you're not following in his footsteps is what it feels like. Like, you have this amazing supportive energy that you're giving to your kids that he just wasn't able to emotionally, physically, mentally do for you. Another weird thing that he was bringing up, which I'm hoping you can explain this to me, was something about his teeth. He kept showing me his teeth. So I don't know if he if he had dentures really young, or if he potentially had something weird with his teeth. Don't know about that?
Nope.
Okay. Yeah. Something weird about that. But yeah, I think the biggest message for him was just how sorry he was, and how he's so proud that you're not making his mistakes.
That's good to hear, and that's something, taking the metaphysical context out of this, that's something I've been very conscientious about. I'm a big advocate for mental health and good mental health. Something I have worn proudly and flown proudly has been breaking cycles, breaking my mother's cycle, breaking my dad's cycle. And so that's something I've consciously committed myself to. Have I been a perfect person? Absolutely not. Have I repeated some of his mistakes unwittingly? Absolutely. But the bigger picture of things, I have done a much better job. Job for sure. For sure. Woo! That's deep.
I know. And I was worried, obviously. I've been doing this for a while, but I still, get in my head about things and wonder if what I'm picking up on is true. But he came through so strongly. I was like, there's no way I can not tell you what was happening. So
I'll tell you one that's kind of funny, and it's kind of anecdotal about this whole thing. So when we were in high school, my best friend and I in high school, my dad had this big head of wily white hair, kind of like Dr. Emmett Brown from Back to the Future. My dad's name was Everett. We had this joke where my best friend Quentin would always call him Emmett, like Emmett Brown. My dad would grab his white wily hair and he'd go, 1.21 gigawatts. So he had this joke forever. So my wife and I are driving we're driving to my daughter's vocal performance a couple of weeks ago. And this is right after my dad had passed. And I see this car in front of me, and it's a Chevy car. And then on a bumper sticker, it says 1.21 gigawatts with a reference to Back to the Future. And my wife says, have you ever seen that before? And I said, no.
What?
I said, I have never seen that bumper sticker in my life. Oh, it gets weirder. So then we're at another show this last Saturday, and it's another one of my daughter's performances. And my dad was a musician and I was a musician. This is my daughter being a musician. We're at my daughter's show. This guy's got a Back to the Future t-shirt on and it says 1.21 gigawatts on it. I leaned over to my wife, I hit her on the arm and she's like, oh my gosh. And she goes, I have never seen this before. And I go, I know, this is twice in a 3-week period of time.
Can I tell you something that I have no proof of? You're just going to have to believe me. I'm on the phone earlier with a friend and he made a joke about 1.21 gigawatts today at like noon. I'm not even kidding. And I'm like, that is hilarious because we love Back to the Future. We make references like that all the time. The fact that you're bringing that up and he made that joke 5 hours ago, very weird. Very, very weird. Wow.
Oh, wow. Who would have known, right? How frequently do things like this happen to you?
Often. I was actually out at a Cubs game a few weeks ago, and I'm not a Cubs fan. I'm a White Sox fan. But I was out undercover at a Cubs game, and I was sitting next to this older man, and all of a sudden his mom is like over my shoulder. I'm getting these dizzy sort of like feelings. You kind of get like this almost like low blood sugar, dizzy spell kind of feeling when a spirit is around. And I knew immediately his mom was trying to get me to give him a message. And you can't do it in situations like that because you don't know if everybody is open to this stuff. And so, I had to go into the bathroom and be like, I'm so sorry. I can't tell your son that you're here because he might not believe, blah, blah, blah. So it happens a lot. It happens very frequently, a little less frequently now that I have stronger boundaries, but all the time before I'm about to do readings or things like that.
Oh, my goodness. That's insane. That's insane.
Crazy. Very crazy.
Now that you're kind of on this run of podcast episodes, are you noticing this happening more frequently, specifically with podcast hosts, or is this a one-time occurrence? Well,
so it's interesting because some people don't need mediumship or messages from their past loved ones. You're my first mediumship reading on this podcast run, because most people need energy help or stuff about their aura or things like right now that they need answers to. So you're the first mediumship reading that I've done on a podcast in a while. So special.
That's amazing. So what goes into an aura reading if you're doing an aura reading on somebody?
Sure. So I'm looking at somebody's energy field, and we have multiple layers in our energy field. So usually what I'll do and what I've done on the last couple episodes that I've been on is just kind of give like an overview of what the person's energy looks like and explain what the colors mean. Usually each color is associated with either a personality trait or, things that the person is currently going through or feeling emotionally. And it's interesting because a lot of the people that have podcasts are very dark blue energy. Blue is associated with the throat chakra. So it's communication, it's, interacting with people, but it's also some grief as well, kind of hanging out in that first layer. That's a common thread with the people that have been hosting these podcasts is everybody has a very blue aura so far, which is really interesting.
That is pretty interesting. Yeah. Has anybody really bucked the trend? And what happens whenever somebody's outside the realms of that?
I think that everybody has different like other colors in their aura, obviously. Like you are actually the first person that has a very distinct orange layer. I don't usually see many orange people. And orange is always associated for me with a couple of things. It's either, people that are dancers or, bodybuilders, people that take physical activity very seriously or train usually will have orange in their aura. I had this amazing dance instructor come in and get a reading from me, and she had one of the most distinct orange auras I've ever seen. It was beautiful. But it's more associated with the lower chakras. So I don't see many people with like orange auras or red auras because they tend to be a little bit more skeptical too, a little bit more grounded. So
sure, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
This has been a lot of fun, and it's been a very educational. So let's talk about where people can find you online.
Sure. So if you want to get connected with me online, I'm on Facebook at Ethereal Jacque. TikTok and YouTube are also at Ethereal Jacque, Ethereal JAC. And then on Instagram at Ethereal Jacque YT. And I'm also offering 20% off any reading for podcast listeners with the code podcast on my website, etherealjacque.com. And yeah, thank you so much for having me on. This was so fun.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. I cannot wait to put this out in the world. And I got to tell you, Jacque, we got to do this again in the not too distant future.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime.
I think what we should do, and I'm saying this out in the world just so it manifests itself, is maybe bring one of my paranormal guests on and you on at the same time so we can have this roundtable discussion about energies and where the world is at spiritually right now.
I would love that. That would be amazing.
And on that note, I got to leave you with my usual closing question. What's your advice for making the world a better place tomorrow than what it is today?
Just be compassionate. Be compassionate to everybody that you can be. I think that we are in an age right now where we're getting into a little bit more of that like selfish mindset. So making sure that we're being cognizant of other people and still having compassion in our hearts, even though things have been hard for the last 3 years. I think that's the biggest thing that I would give as advice.
Yes, the last 3 years has been hard as shit.
Yeah, for real. For real. Don't I know?
I fight it every single day. Jacque Hilbrich, the world is a better place with you in it. Thank you for being on my show today.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
So this is the epilogue as promised, and this is where things get a little bit dicey. First and foremost, I want to say my guest was fabulous. She was awesome. I really enjoyed the conversation that I had with her. While 99% of my life is an open book, something that I haven't been very transparent about is how hard the grieving process has been hitting me the past month and a half. People go through their different stages of grief. Mine has defaulted to anger and frustration. It is no secret that I was estranged from my father, but that does not change the fact that he was my father. So I think it's obvious human nature to have completed this episode and had some very mixed emotions about it. As I was editing, I played it for my wife, and we both felt it was fairly good. It came across really well. I had slept on it that night, and then I woke up the next day, and I was really uneasy about it to the point of where I was considering not running the episode at all. I reached out to some of my trusted podcasting friends, and they gave me some words of support that I really appreciated. Spirituality is something I have always struggled with. It's why I don't make any firm statements about it one way or the other. And I think this was a case where I was letting my inner skeptic win. I mean, it's not that hard to find the information about my father having recently passed away, and the fact that I am such an open book and an oversharer tends to lend to all of this. Couple all of that with a natural sense of anxiety, I really got in my own head about all of it. Now, I pride myself on integrity, so I had already planned on sharing some details about this with my two younger brothers before I put it out into the world. So I extracted the 10-minute long clip where Dad came through and sent it to my brothers just to gauge their thoughts on it. This is where things get interesting. I feel it's important to be honest here and say that up until my dad's passing recently, I was also estranged from them as well. Both of my brothers listened to the clip and absolutely freaked the fuck out. Remember that part where she talked about his teeth and I just kind of brushed it off and set it to the side? My youngest brother told me that my dad had all of his teeth pulled 6 years ago in an emergency procedure because of an infection he had in his mouth. Because of his health condition, which ultimately led to his death, he was not able to keep his dentures in because it would choke him out. So he became really self-conscious about not having teeth and not having a smile. I did not know that until my brothers listened to that clip. He went on even further to talk about how she referenced him being so tired. And I guess that's all he could do that last week or last few weeks was sleep constantly. He was so tired. And Matthew said that he kept making references to all of the grandchildren and kept saying the phrase, "I'm sorry," to Matthew over and over and over again. It freaked Matt out pretty harshly. Stephen kind of echoed these sentiments and offered a little bit of color with some experiences that he had. Mind you, up until recently, I had not talked to either of my younger brothers for years. And even recently, it's been mostly through text message, 1 or 2 sentences over the phone, and the conversation is done. My wife listened to the clip, and there was one phrase that kind of stuck out to her. I guess my dad had messaged her via Facebook a few years ago because he wanted to wish me a happy birthday and tell his grandkids that he loved them. But his exact phrase was, "I don't know if he's even going to want to talk to me." Make of all of that what you will. I am very firm in the belief that politics, religion, spirituality are unique to an individual. You are an individual, so is every other person around you. So your feelings are unique to you. But I gotta tell you, I love the idea of dwelling in the possibility. So I want to thank Jacque Hilbrich for doing the podcast today. It was an eye-opening experience, and hopefully we could do it again in the future. Make sure you give me a follow on all social media platforms. I am on Instagram, Threads, TikTok, Facebook, and sometimes I use Twitter. But most importantly, go to www.caughtonthemic.com. You can click in the upper right-hand corner to past episodes and see every single episode that I have recorded. This has been Caught on the Mic with Michael Clark. I'm Michael Clark. Until next time, thank you.